difficulties. So sorry about that for jumping off. But now we are back. So yeah. Anyway, there's something wrong with my other page. I don't know what's going on, so I'm on this one, and it just whatever. So anyway, yeah. Thanks for tuning in. I'm only going to talk for about 30 minutes today because I want to kind of give an intro into what I'm going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks, because somebody was asking, a friend of mine, shirt's a little bright in your face here, asking about what is kingdomhood. Somebody was asking about what that is, and what I want to do was just kind of touch base a little bit on what is kingdomhood, and actually the 5 pillars of building a kingdomhood and what that really means, because it's more than just me just talking about having a show and having guests on and going forth and having dialogue. To me, it's really about action, and it's about building something. So I kind of want to, over the next 5 weeks, kind of give my ideas on what a kingdomhood is. And again, this is my interpretation of it. This is just my idea of what I think it should look like. I'm always open for suggestions and other people's ideas, because at the end of the day, I really think that we as people of Black folks need to build something, and we need to start it like yesterday, especially since we did it before. We built Rosewood, Florida, and of course they firebombed it, and then we built Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they blew it up. And we were simply working and minding our own business. And white people got scared when Black people build. They blow everything up. As a matter of fact, every time Black people move forward or get an advancement, white rage appears. I understand that. But just the fact that they were able to build something in the 1920s, our ancestors, that should encourage us. And there's no reason why we can't build something, another Rosewood or another Tulsa, in 2021. There's absolutely no reason why we can't build another kingdomhood. Now Black people have moved forward. We had made, as far as laws and things like that, there has been incremental advancement as far as people of color. There is, if you want to go back in the 1800s, you got the 13th Amendment. How much or how well that did for Black folks. The answer is not a lot. We know that. We know what happened in the 13th Amendment. Then we got the 14th Amendment giving us citizenship. How did that do us? Nah, not too much. Then we did the 15th Amendment, which gave us the right to vote. And did that help Black folks out a lot? Absolutely not. But when we were able to do a Reconstruction and start, owning land and having our own businesses and being supervisors and bosses on jobs, and was able to accumulate wealth, somewhat of wealth, it's incremental wealth compared to what white people were building. That's when we really saw the most advancement of Black people, when Black people were able to build wealth. Here's an example. Between 1850 and 1900, there were there had to be thousands of newspapers and insurance companies that were built and developed by Black people. So in around 1950 and 1970, it was 32. It was $1 for every 32 white dollars. By 1910, it was $16 per every white dollar. Okay, so even between 1850 and 1910, when Black folks started building their own, opening insurance companies, opening newspapers, the wealth gap between whites and Blacks seemed to shrink. Then, of course, in the 1920s, we built Rosewood and Tulsa. And, of course, they bombed all that and crashed and burned. And then the wealth gap definitely just goes right. It definitely goes back to the increase of $32 white dollars for every white, 31 Black dollar for every 32 white dollars, because they bombed everything we had, and they blew it up, and they saw we were trying to progress financially and build Black wealth. Okay, When we were freed from slavery in 1865, we owned 1/2 of 1% of America's wealth. 2021, Black people own 1/2 of 1% of America's wealth. So even though there were incremental growth as far as laws, as far as desegregation, as far as allowing some Black people to become rich, there's some that made it through and become very rich, some even billionaires. As far as the ownership of wealth in this country, it hasn't gotten any better since we were freed in 1865. And that is just a shame. See, what it really comes down to is wealth, is closing the wealth gap between white and Black America. That is the one area where we are lacking in. And it shows in our neighborhoods. Okay. Our neighborhoods. If you look at the Black neighborhoods, how decimated they are, how the school system is horrible, how we have dilapidated buildings and the infrastructure is all in shambles. And we really don't have an African American hood. Or city. We got plenty of hoods, I'm sorry. But we don't have a progressive, well-to-do Black African American community nowhere in this country. I haven't found one. Now, there are Black people. They're like in Atlanta and, here in LA where they have Baldwin Hills, where there's a lot of Black people who live in a particular area. But they live in that area, but they don't own most of the businesses. They don't control the political, the policing, the education system. They're not in charge of that. They don't have Black banks within their neighborhoods. We don't have any Black, but you go into Korean neighborhoods and you see some Jewish neighborhoods and you see other race neighborhoods. They have their own banks. Go up, if you don't believe me, you can go up there on Olympic in Vermont. You don't need to go to China, just go there or Koreatown, and you'll see they have their own banks. Now it's a Bank of America, a bank, but you'll see the writing in whatever that language, whether it's Korean or Chinese or whatever it is. They have their own banks. See, these communities build wealth and they keep it in their communities. This is the one thing that African Americans are not doing for whatever reason. So this is my idea of a kingdomhood. What we need to do to build a community. And that's what I'm talking about over the next 5 weeks. And again, this is just my opinion. Somebody else may have a different opinion, but we definitely need to do something. So the first thing topics I'm going to cover is access to wealth in a somewhat of a socialized economy within the Black community. And here's what I mean. Access to wealth. Okay. As I mentioned before, white people definitely own the banks. Some Asian communities got their own banks, and Jewish communities got their own banks. Okay. We don't have any banks. We have no go-to wealth stream to help us build anything. And part of the reason that is because there are Black banks out there, but there are Black banks out there, but we are not supporting them though. Like we are not supporting the Black banks like we should, right? We're not putting all our money into Black banks. Okay, we're putting our money in all the white banks. Okay, so we don't have any Black banks. So that is something that should be the pillar of base one to building a kingdomhood, which is a developed community for African Americans. Now, don't get me wrong. Other people can live in the community. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's only Black folks. But my point is, if we have some place that we own and control everything, we don't have that anywhere in America. So again, this is like other races can live in the city. But I'm just saying is, when a Jewish kid or a white kid or an Asian kid wake up in their neighborhood, they go to the store, and when they walk in that store, the owner of that store looks like them. That doesn't happen in our community. In our community, you got Asians that do all the nails and the beauty supplies, and then you have Arabs that own Arabs, and you have some Jewish people that own the liquor stores, And you got, and then you have Jewish people that own all the buildings, especially the commercial buildings, and own the apartment buildings, and they're absentee landlords. So there is no ownership. So if you don't own anything, you don't have any access to wealth. So access to wealth is going to be the basis. I want to talk about how we can go about doing that. Access to wealth in our community, having Black banks in our community that give loans at low rates, so we can start Black businesses and buy and develop land within our community, and we own things. So what this will take is somewhat of a socialized economy. Okay, here's what I mean. Everybody is so upset about socialism, but if you have a community like say like South Side Chicago, or if you have a community like the Bronx, or if you have a community like South Central, right, that pretty much is impacted and doesn't really have any, they have, schools, they have school issues, was not being properly funded. You got the kids in the job, there's no jobs, there's no infrastructure, no after school programs, the neighborhoods, the look and feel of the neighborhoods are in shambles. Where are you going to get the money from to build those neighborhoods? Tax dollars? Ain't going to come from there, because there's not a lot of tax revenue. If we ever were going to build a neighborhood, as I mentioned before, definitely have access to banks. It helps. But also, we need to have access to people not donating, but everybody in that community, 10% out of their check comes into the infrastructure and building the city and rebuilding the schools. Here's why I say that. You give 10% of your money to a church for a preacher who's selling you hope, right? We give 10%, your tithes and offering to the church, so that preacher can go buy a Benz. You're doing that. So what's the difference between giving somebody to a church building, and giving that money into into a bank account, a bank account controlled by the bank, and everybody in the city puts 10% in, and that money is taken out and put in to buy businesses. Then when you buy those businesses, you have a percentage ownership in that business. If you're gonna have a Taco Bell, let me go back. We need to have healthy eating. But say, for example, you buy a McDonald's. Everybody pulls their resources together, and we go buy a McDonald's. Okay, and you own a percentage of that McDonald's. So we put all our resources together. That's socialism, in a way where you take money from everybody and you put it into a general fund to develop a community. Okay, so that's what I mean by socialized economy, and how that can really help us. But there's a problem with that, though. Black people don't want to be accountable to each other. We are collectively lazy. Individually, we'll get out there and do work, but collectively, it'll be hard pressed to find somebody who wants to give their money to build a community. But like I said, we'll give our money to some preacher. Black preachers have gotten rich off your tithes and damn offering. And where's that gotten us? Where's giving all our money to these churches gotten us? You have preachers, and I'm going to cover this in my religious section of this plan. We talk about religion and just overall how that impacts the Black community. Is it helping us? Is it harming us? What type of religion should we have, if any? You know what I mean? And this is individual. I don't mess. Hey, Christian, you're Buddhist, you're Jehovah's Witnesses, Church of God in Christ, Protestant, Catholic, whatever your religion is. Hey, God bless you. That's your religion. But I'm just saying is, as far as building a community, the spiritual part of it, the religion, is very important. Because look, there's some communities where we got churches on every corner. This Black church takes $14 million a week out of the Black community. Look at our communities. You have Black pastors that are multi-millionaires, and the median income of African Americans in and around that church is at the poverty level. So so my point for saying this is, you're already giving 10% of your money to a church, because these pastors wouldn't be so rich. So that's what I mean about access to wealth, our own banks, and if need be, have a somewhat socialized economy where everybody pitches in 10%, put it into a bank, And that money is used to go buy businesses and to go develop commercial real estate, whatever it may be. And then that community owns that, or you have a piece of that pie. Okay. So then once you got the money and everything and the infrastructure right, then, and this can go in any order, but I'm just going to go politicians. Then you buy the politicians. See, Black people vote, but Black people, for the most part, don't finance anybody. They don't finance the politicians. Then you get mad when they don't do what you want them to do. You go out there and vote and protest, but the white power structure, whether it be Democrat or Republican, millionaires and corporations are financing the politicians. So whoever financing your campaign, that's who you're going to deal with. You appreciate the vote, but what you're going to appreciate is somebody who will is going to finance your campaign. Because without the finance, you don't have a campaign. So, like my mom used to say, money runs the world and bullshit runs the marathon. So that way, so once you have your wealth, you have a solid wealth foundation and a revenue stream, then you can get the politicians. And then there won't be, well, these politicians, I vote for them and they don't do nothing for us. That's not going to happen because you're financing them. And then you're going to be able to say, hey, you better do this. First of all, it's going to be a no-brainer because you financed, the community came together, put money behind their campaign and financed them and helped them put in office. There is no way they're going to be in office and not be able to do what they said they're going to do because you financed them, right? You're the power. And this is the point. Black people have influence, but very few Black people have power. White people have the power. Black people may have influence. Let me give you an example. Michael Jordan had influence as far as the Chicago Bulls. Obviously, he had influence. But Jerry Reinsdorf, the general manager and the owner, of course, had the power. Because if Jordan had the power, he could have kept that team together another year. But that general manager, the little short, 5'2", little butterball, cross-eyed white man that probably never even shot a basketball a day in his life, was able to tell basketball aficionados, Jordan's probably the greatest basketball player ever to play the game, was able, of course they had to pay Jordan, but he was able to tell Jordan who's going to be on his team, who's not going to be on his team. It wasn't Jordan's decision. So Jordan had influence, but didn't have any power. See, when you're financing, you have the power. And other races do this. You look at Jewish community, Asian community, even the Latinos community. That's why the Latino wealth is higher. We're behind the Latinos now in personal wealth. We're behind them now because they're working together. They're pulling their money to get their resources together and building something. So that's what I'm talking about. Somewhat of socialized economy and access to wealth. Because once you get that, you can build. If you don't have wealth, you can't do anything. So now we finance the politicians, right? So they're going to be endeared to doing whatever the hell we want. So the money that we're paying taxes, which politicians pay to build your city, they take care of the roads. See, it's not their job to rebuild businesses. That's why you got to have access to banks and a socialized economy, because it's not the politician's responsibility to build businesses. That's not their job. Their job is not to, is not to build businesses. It's not to, have banks come in and all that stuff. That's not their job. The financial infrastructure is not their job. Their job is to take care of the roads, take care of the lights, keeping the city clean, taking the look and feel of the city is their responsibility. So you get a good politician that's going to do that. So then once you got the politician, then what we'll talk about, the next we'll talk on the list will be policing. That's a sore spot, right, to any Black community. Well, once you have control of the wealth and the revenue stream and you control the politicians, then you decide who the police chief is. You decide who, you make the rules as far as the police managing your city. You make the rules. You want community policing? Then if you can demand that. They do in the Jewish neighborhoods and the white neighborhoods. They're able to set the law what the police are going to do. You're not going to be pulling over black kids for no reason. You're not going to shoot an unarmed black man in our community. Otherwise, you'll be fired and you'll be brought up on charges because we elected the DA. Okay, we elected the DA. We financed the district attorney's campaign. So his thing is, so in this city, if you shoot an unarmed black man, you're going to jail. And then maybe you could have make the insurance company cover it, have insurance to cover them. So when they do shoot an unarmed black, if it ever happens, then the insurance pays out to the victims, not the city. But you got to be in control to have all that. So anyway, you control the policing. So what's next? Education. Education, in all intents and purposes, is just the way it's taught now is nothing but I should say it's just nothing but I can't say it's a waste of education. Never a waste of time. But education, our education is the way it is now, was built on a system of white supremacy. That's really all it is. Here's why I say that. Because in school, especially African American kids, the way the system is now, are taught nothing that helps them deal with the ebb and flow of life. And I'm not talking just from a race thing. How about critical thinking skills? They make you take biology, they make you take chemistry and algebra and trigonometry and all these subjects. You don't need that stuff. You don't need that unless you're going to be an engineer. Unless you decide you want to be an engineer or you want to decide you want to be a biologist, then fine, take all that stuff. But what if a kid wants to be an entrepreneur? How about teaching them how to start a business? How about teaching them how to get venture capitalists? How about how to pay taxes? How about how to do business filings? How about critical thinking skills? And also, Black kids really need to understand their culture and taught their history in its fullness, because they don't do that in white schools. They don't want to teach you history. They don't even want you to know your history. In fact, they try to hide most of it from you, or they try to revise the history. So teaching these Black kids their culture and their rich history, along with teaching them life skills. School does not teach you life skills. You got people with master's degrees that couldn't start a business to save their life because they're not taught that. You write a bunch of papers, you do research, and then you take a test, if you only take a test, write a paper, and then they give you a college degree. That doesn't give you life skills. It doesn't give you that hustle. It doesn't teach you how to start something and build something. School doesn't teach that. So school should be centered around that. About like they have in these schools. There's one off, I think it's off Olympic and La Cienega. There's a Jewish school, and you can imagine in that Jewish school, it's a green school on the east side of the west side of the street on La Cienega, and ain't nothing but Jews up in there. And trust me, believe you me, they are teaching Jewish culture. They are teaching these kids to build businesses and have them in their own neighborhoods. They are teaching them how to go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go be whatever, and then come back and work in the community and help build. That's what they're doing. That's why their communities are so rich. That's why they have generational wealth, because everybody comes in and works together. Now, I'm not saying all the Jews do this, or all the whites, or all the Asians do this, but they do it. Enough of them are doing it, because you look at their communities compared to ours. Okay, have they dealt with systematic racism? No. Have they dealt with Jim Crow? No. Have they dealt with redlining? No. So yeah, they've been able to ride that train on our backs on the tracks that we built. Yes, I understand that. But at some point, we have to start look at what they're doing as the model, and we need to start doing it. Okay, so that's education, educating our young kids from everything from, I forgot this, everything from learning how to grow their own food, from everything about teaching them their history, from everything about teaching them how to start and run a business. By the time a kid is 18 years old, he should graduate with high school, fully understand with a business plan on how to run and start a business. Okay, maybe some want to go because college is not for all kids. But maybe some just want to go to college and be a doctor, a lawyer, or something, or scientist. Don't get me. School is needed. If you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a scientist, you want to be an engineer, you got to go to school. You want to build rockets, you got to go to school for that. Absolutely. But if you don't want to do any of that, you really don't need to go to get a college degree. If you just want to start a business, start your business. You don't need to go to college, because at the end of the day, college is a racket. It is an absolute racket. These universities just making a whole lot of money teaching these kids jack diddly. But society says you got to have a degree if you want to go work in corporate America. Okay, so if corporate America is not for you, there's really no need to get a degree, because you got people in corporate America like Bill Gates and Michael Dell and Zuckerberg and all these guys who are hiring and firing people with degrees every day. They dropped out of college. Some flunked out, some dropped out. And yeah. So these are the things. Yeah. So these are the 5 things that we need to build a community. And that's what I'm going to cover over the next 5 weeks. Next week, I'm starting with access to wealth in a socialized economy. And we're going to dig in deep about what that means, what that looks like. And, you guys can give me your thoughts. Then a week after that, after wealth, and also that'll cover having Black-owned businesses too. Then after that, we'll go into policy, because policy is important. You got to have policy. You got to have policy. You got to have policies that's going to push policy. That's really important to the look and feel of the city. It's very important. Okay, because it don't matter how many businesses you have, you don't build the roads. You know what I mean? You don't build the school. The city build, unless it's a private school. But if it's public school, then of course the city builds that. As far as having the money to hire good teachers, that's the school district and superintendent and all that stuff. So that's where our tax dollars are going to go for. So we got to have good policy, and then we want to have good policing. Okay, we want to have good community policing. Okay, what does that look like? And I should give you my opinion on that. And then again, we're going to talk about, and then we'll talk about education. If you notice, the education is the last thing on the list. It really is. Education is the last thing on the list. And the reason why education is the last thing on the list is because, don't get me wrong, education is important, but it's really the wealth, the policing, and policy. And then I put health in there to talk about health, and then education, because pretty much when we're educating our kids, they got to have a system that we can educate them about. It's hard. That's the problem with the communities now. Is you got a teacher that's going to teach a kid biology, but look at the neighborhood he's living in. Why in the hell do I want to go learn biology or learn algebra when I'm worried about when my roads are all tore up, when my community's torn down, when we don't own a damn thing? When I get up in the community every day and I walk through the city, and it makes me feel like I'm nothing. So we need to build an education system first. We need to build a financial infrastructure first, and then we'll worry about education. Now, don't get me wrong, we'll still be educating our kids, but I'm saying as far as this priority, that's the last one. And then the last one, I was going to talk about spirituality. Spirituality. And everybody has different religions, but we need to. But I want to talk about putting these Black churches on notice. These churches in our community. You can't be a church in our community and you just take it in tithes and offering. No. Now again, we might have to worry about police brutality. We may have to worry about our neighborhoods being tore up and Black on Black crime. Those things are going to be handled because we're going to have a good infrastructure set up. Black, have Black-owned banks and Black-owned businesses. And these kids can, after school, can get a job, can come from school, from those who are not playing sports, can go to work on the weekend and work within these Black businesses. And that's another thing, too, that I forgot to mention. We build these Black businesses, and then we can hire these kids to work. We can hire these kids. We can give them a job where they can earn money, okay? On top of, for the young kids, having after-school programs. You see, kids are busy, but there's an infrastructure for our young boys and girls to work within. Okay, that's what I'm talking about, access to wealth and social life. You got to have the money. You can't have after-school program without no money. You can't have Black businesses and hire people. You don't have any money. You can't build neighborhoods. You got to have money. So that's why wealth is the first one. So, and these churches have to be involved in that. The Black church takes $14 million a week out of the Black community. Look at our communities. No more of that. Ain't no more of that. If you a preacher, we don't need a church on every corner. Ain't gonna be this tithes and offering stuff. All those tithes and offering. You get tithes and offering from the community. If that's happening, you take a certain amount of that tithes and offering, and you have to give that back in the community. Of course, you got to pay your lights and the gas and all that. All the stuff that they have to take to run. Matter of fact, Black folks will own the building that they're in. So no pastor is going to own a church. Is going to own the building. That's out. Now the pastor, if he's going to be a community person, he in the community, and he's working in the community will provide him a decent living. He can live within that community and have a decent house for his family. I don't think preachers should be poor. I think they should live a comfortable middle-class living if they're doing the work. But the fact that you have a 20,000 square foot house on the hill and everybody else is living down in poverty, oh no. Ain't gonna be no Creflo dollars and and all these these bootleg these pimps in the pulpit. Oh no, that ain't happening. You can't do that in this community. That's what you can't do. And you need to be a pillar in the community, a pillar working in the community. Feeding the homeless, whatever it may be, working with kids. You need to be in the community working. We need to demand and teaching the Bible in a way that it strengthens, uplifts, and builds self-esteem within our children and in our community. Because the way Christianity has been practiced and indoctrinated throughout the history of this country, it's been pretty much developed to keep us in slavery. So we need to take an approach to spirituality and in a religion, if you want to call it that, that's going to uplift and build the Black community. And that means that giving people self-esteem so they're not in gangs, on drugs, and things of that nature. Is there a perfect system? Absolutely not. Crime is going to happen. It happens in Beverly Hills. It happens in any neighborhood. But the level of crime is happening because the neighborhood has no opportunity won't be happening. Because where there's opportunity and men who are in leadership and showing things the right way, it'll definitely make a difference in how much crime and gang violence and drug selling and drug use is in that neighborhood. It's easy. Compare a lower class a poor Black neighborhood to a community where a lot of Black people live in. Like I said, there's no upper class Black neighborhood around the country that I know of. But yeah, you see the difference. So we'll be able to. So that's where we want to go. That's kingdomhood. Kingdomhood is building a kingdom. It's building a neighborhood, because it's not a hood. Because a hood is a community that's been stripped of its resources. So building a Black community is what kingdomhood is about. And it's those 5 approaches: access to wealth, in a socialized economy, right? Having businesses, commercial and businesses in our neighborhood, being able to, under Black ownership. That way we can hire young Black boys and girls, right? Then we have policy, our politicians. Then we have policing. We have education. And we have, and then we have the religious base. Now, again, people are different religions. I get that. But the way Christianity has been practiced, and I'm not familiar with how the other ones are practiced, but the way Christianity has been practiced, the way these Black preachers have done this community, I'm solely talking about that. That's over with. Can't be doing none of that no more. So yeah, so that is going to be the subject for the next 5 weeks. All right. My dream and my vision of building a kingdomhood, to seeing an upper class Black community before I leave this earth. This is what it is right here. That's what it means. All right. So I'll be back next week. We'll look at access to wealth and how we get it. And until then, God bless you guys. Be safe. And I look forward to giving you guys an in-depth view into what kingdomhood is. God bless.